Our reading today is from John chapter 10, reading verses 11 to 18. John chapter 10, verses 11 to 18. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Amen, and may God bless that reading from his holy word. Tell me this, do you feel safe? Do you have a sense of security? Are you anxious? Are you worried about the way things are heading? Do you feel that, like anyone in charge knows what they're doing? Do you feel that we as a people, as a society, however you want to group yourself, do you feel that we know who we are or where we're going? Do you believe what you're being told? Do you ever suspect you're being lied to? Let's remind ourselves of how Jesus saw the mass of humanity. If you look at Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, you find these words. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. When Jesus looks out and surveys the mass of humanity, that is what he sees. People who are harassed and helpless. Do you feel harassed and helpless today? Perhaps. Sounds like many people, I would imagine, and how they feel. I'm sure of that. Like sheep without a shepherd. What do you imagine a flock of sheep without a shepherd would look like? What do you imagine they would do? Run anywhere? Follow the crowd? Wherever that led, be struck by hysteria and panic and be running into danger? What would they look like? A flock of sheep without a shepherd. Dishevelled, wounded, unloved. And in many circumstances, how could they possibly survive for even a few days without perishing or being devoured? And then remind yourself, with all that in your mind, that that's how Jesus sees humanity. That's how God looks upon the mass of humanity. Sees it in that way, like sheep without a shepherd, and it isn't a pretty sight. But wait a minute, you might say. We have some shepherds. We're not sheep without a shepherd. Maybe you object to that categorization, that description. You might say, we're not that. We're not sheep without a shepherd by any means. We have political leaders, and we have social influencers, and we have philosophers, and we have celebrities, and we have people who are elected to represent us and who work on our behalf. And guess what else? In our universities, we have scholars, and we have experts, and we have all sorts of clever people who tell us what we need to know. We're not sheep without a shepherd. We've got pastors, and we've got ministers, and so on, and so on. And I had to include that last category because it would be completely disingenuous of me when I'm compiling this list of shepherds, which are rather hired hands in a sense, to not include ministers, preachers, and pastors in that lump, in that category. Now, I'm not going to dwell on. So you see, there is a group of people, I suppose, missing from this passage here in John 10, and I think you find them again, you recover them again in John 21. Because what you've got here is the presentation of hired hands who will run for the hills, effectively, when they're going against stuff, and we'll get on to that. And then you've got, by contrast, the Good Shepherd, Jesus. So then you might say, well, where do the likes of myself come, the ministers and so on? We're not the Good Shepherd. I'm not going to stand up here today and say, oh, I am the Good Shepherd. There's only one Good Shepherd, okay? So I was looking online during the week, and there was different articles on this, and different takes on this. Where does the minister, the pastor, the preacher, the church leader, the elder, and maybe by extension, where do they fit in to that category? Because they're charged with looking after the sheep. So are they shepherds in a sense? Or are they hired hands? But are they a different category of hired hands from the ones that are described here in John 10? In John 21, remember, this is when Peter is restored. Remember, Peter denies Jesus 3 times, but remember, 3 times he's asked, do you love me? By Jesus. Do you love me, Peter? And 3 times he comes back and says, yes, you know I love you. And what does Jesus tell him to do? Well, tend to my sheep and feed my sheep. So perhaps I and others who have been called to this role and to similar roles and to church leadership are hired hands of a type. Perhaps we're shepherds of a type, but we're not the Good Shepherd, and we would hope we are not the hired hands as described here. But as I say, it would be completely disingenuous for me to have mentioned, scholars and politicians and others, without also including pastors and preachers, for we are but mere frail humans also. So people might say, well, we've got all these people, and they look out for us, and so in a sense we've got these good folk, these good shepherds who are caring for us. But does that make you feel safe? And do you agree with that? Would you talk about those people in the sense of being like a shepherd? Do they make you feel like they've got you and they're looking after you? Well, I want you to keep on reflecting on that as we move forward. But what we need to talk about at this point is the hired hand. The hired hand that we never got into with the children, but we need to talk about this hired hand. It's the elephant in the room at the moment. Because we have to think about, what's the hired hand like? What's the hired hand about? And let's also remind ourselves that Jesus here is most likely having a wee dig, you might say, in Scotland, having a wee dig at the Pharisees here. It wouldn't be outrageous to suggest that perhaps he sees a lot of the hired hand in the behaviour of the Pharisees, but perhaps not only them. But there is that insinuation that they are amongst the category of the hired hands. And why is that? Well, like all hired hands, what are hired hands doing in this situation? They're playing the role of the shepherd, aren't they? They're playing the role of the shepherd because they've been paid to do that. They've been offered a wage and given a job description which is very simple. Just do what a shepherd would do. But they're not shepherds. They're hired hands. So they're playing the role of the shepherd. They might dress like the shepherd. They might say things and do things that a shepherd might do. They might say inspiring things. They might say seemingly wise things. They might say interesting things. They might urge you to be good and moral and kind even. And they'll deliver all that with an authoritative voice in a smooth vernacular that you can understand. And they'll make you promises like the shepherd does, and they'll tell you all about how things are going to be in the future and how you're going to be safe and how you're going to be fine. Because they know you want to hear that all is fine. And they know that you want to hear that they have the solution to any problems anyway. So just in the same way that the hired hand would literally dress like a shepherd, would go through the motions of the shepherd, so too today, the hired hands will do those things. And they'll present themselves as shepherds for you to follow and for you to look up to. They'll appear very shepherd-esque. They'll appear very shepherd-like. And here's the clincher. Others are following them. Others are following them. And that matters, doesn't it? Because, the hired hand comes along, and to the sheep, to a large extent, it's no different than if the shepherd was there. The sheep get the instructions, and they follow the hired hand, and you can get them into the sheep pen, and he can do a lot of things. He can do a lot of things that the shepherd can do, and everything seems fine for a while. And after all, every other sheep's doing it. So if you're a little sheep there, and the hired hand comes along, and the hired hand tells you to do something, and the hired hand calls you to follow, well, it's relevant that the wee sheep beside you and the one behind you and the one on the other side of you, they're doing the same thing. Because every sheep wants to do what the other sheep are doing, and we as humans are very much like that. And God knows we're like that. And that's why Jesus chooses this allegory, this metaphor. Because we're like that. We'll go where the other sheep go. We'll do what the other sheep are doing. We'll do especially what the pretty sheep and the clever sheep are doing, and so on. And in our frailty, that's the way it works. That's the way we act. And very often the last thing you want to be is outside the flock. So you conform, and you do what the other sheep are doing. And if the other sheep are listening to this person, to this guy or that woman or whoever, and if enough sheep believe that this is the shepherd and they should be following it, then the others will follow the crowd. They'll follow the flock. This is the one who's going to lead them to new pastures. This is the one that's going to lead them to green and pleasant hills. The one who's going to lead them to hills carpeted in lush green grass, and they'll live happily ever after, feasting on the abundant greenery of our own wee paradise. And for a time, that narrative may appear to hold up. So the hired hand comes along, and he leads the flock, and yes, they find some nice grass, and that's lovely, and then he gets them into the sheep pen, and for a while, the sheep are completely oblivious to the fact that this is just a hired hand. To them, it's a shepherd, To them, it's the shepherd, and it's someone to follow, it's someone to trust, and things are going well. And you think, this is wonderful. We've got a shepherd, we've got loads of shepherds looking after us, how well we're doing. And do you know what's true of our world today as much as it was of Jesus' time? There's no shortage of hired hands, They're 10 a penny. And yes, perhaps everything for a time is okay. For a time we're doing just fine. We're relying on the hired hands, and the hired hands look like the shepherd, and they say lots of wise things, and they just, it all seems to be going just fine. But what happens when the sun starts blazing? When the heat is on? When the grass is burnt and it isn't so green anymore? What happens when there's not so much of it to go around? And then suddenly things change. And we wonder if these so-called shepherds have a clue what they're doing. And you see the burning eyes of the wolves in the night time, encircling the pen, and the brilliant flashes of their hungry white teeth accompanied with their howls of malintent. And those decisions that the apparent shepherd made don't seem so wise anymore, do they? And the advice that they offered seems pretty useless now. And you wonder how many have been misled and waylaid by hired hands over the centuries. How many have been led astray by those who called themselves prophets or gurus or religious men and women or wise men or sages? How many have convinced others that they had their best interests at heart and they've just led them into destruction? How many have built a cult of personality all around them and led millions upon millions of sheep, not to fresh fields, but to killing fields, into the clutches of the wolf. Not to a promised land of plenty, but to a desert of death and starvation. And your mind jumps to Stalin, to Hitler, to Pol Pot, to these hired hands who presented themselves as shepherds and led millions to death. But you don't even have to go to that level. There'll be at lower levels, there's lots of different stories of those who have presented themselves in such a way and led people, well, completely up the garden path. Hired hands are not hard to come by. You see, they're 10 a penny. And even today, there are many who are offering their services. They're telling you that they know the way and that you should follow and you should listen to them. And all you need to do is give them your devotion, or give them your money, or give them your vote, or give them your attention, or buy their product, or buy their book, or follow their channel, and so on and so on. And they're going to take care of you, they tell you. And they're going to show you the way to happiness and to abundance. And you're all going to be like little spring lambs. It's been lovely seeing them, isn't it? It's been lovely seeing them when we took a wee drive the other day out by Beaulieu, and that is just beautiful. But, they're going to tell you you're just like that wee lamb in the field, leaping and playing in the pastures. And only if you just do what they tell you to do and trust them. But like all the hired hands before them, they're only in it for what they can get out of it. And they're only committed until it's inconvenient for them to be so. For when the wolf and the wolves come prowling, when the wild beasts start stalking the flock, then they run for the hills. Because the reality is, as Jesus says, the hired hand doesn't care. Because they're not his sheep. And he just doesn't get paid enough, quite honestly. He doesn't care. Not really. They don't really believe in what they say. They only say it because they know you like to hear it. They don't want the danger. They don't want the risk. You don't think they would really die for you, do you? They might have told you that, but it was just a figure of speech, you see. They're not going to be fighting wolves and bears on your behalf. They're not going to be fighting anything else, for that matter, on your behalf. And even if they do pluck up the courage to do that, they're not going to be as powerful and strong and capable and courageous as they told you they were. And they're going to exit the fight pretty quickly when it gets too much, and they're going to run for the hills. It's a guarantee. Jesus tells us that. That's what the hired hand does. Like they're willing to work, they're willing to do a lot of what the shepherd does, but they're not going to put their life on the line for the flock. So the world will furnish you with a never-ending supply of hired hands. They're very, very common. They come along all the time. And when one does a run in, another will happily take their place. As long as there's a flock to make a living off, as long as there's a flock to give them a sense of authority and power, as long as there's a flock to follow them, that you'll have plenty of applicants for the job of hired hand. But there's one who's not a hired hand. And there's one who's truly a shepherd of the sheep. Not a hired hand, but the good shepherd, who by contrast truly does love the sheep, truly does care for you. And a good shepherd will not abandon his sheep. A good shepherd knows his sheep, each one of them, and in turn they know him and they know his voice. That's what Jesus tells us. So there's a relationship that goes beyond the contractual. You see, the hired hand's relationship with you is just contractual. It might be literally a contract, it might be constitutional, it might be some sort of other relationship, but ultimately it's contractual, it's functional. But the relationship between the good shepherd and his sheep goes beyond, way, way beyond that, goes way deeper than that. They are his life, and for them he would be prepared to lay down that life, no question. He'll lay it on the line. No matter how fearsome the enemy, no matter how heavy the price. He would literally lie across the entrance to the sheep pen, right across that entrance to the enclosure, and prevent thieves and robbers and bandits and wild animals of all kind from stealing the flock, from stalking the flock, from wreaking havoc. And he's not a hired hand, he's the real deal. The one who has laid his life on the line for you. That is Jesus Christ himself, and there is none like him, there is none other than him. He has no comparison, there is no equal. He is, as he says, the Good Shepherd, and he's not like the hired hands. There's lots of them. There's maybe thousands of them, maybe millions in the history of the world, but there's only one who is the Good Shepherd. So tell me this, why do we spend so much time looking to the hired hands out there? Why do we do it? Because we do it. I have to hold up my hand and say that at times I'm seduced by, that sounds wonderful, and that politician's big one was just so good, and then a lot of what follows falls short or leaves you with a sour taste or whatever it is, or that church leader, they were so wonderful, and then again it doesn't work out quite the way they said, and so on. So why do we spend so much time looking to the hired hands while we ignore the voice of Jesus, the Word of God? We turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to it. When you're looking for guidance, when you're looking for direction, when you're feeling a bit unsafe, when you're feeling a bit insecure, and what do? You go, you want to hear a voice, you want to hear something, and you go to the hired hand. Why do we do that? Instead of listening for the voice of the Good Shepherd who gives his life for you and for I. So, I want to challenge you today as we finish to think, are you following the Good Shepherd? Are you one of his sheep? Do you know his voice? Does he know you? Are you in that relationship with the Good Shepherd that goes deep? Or are you just in a superficial, functional, contractual relationship with a hired hand? Maybe it's time to break that contract, to break that link, to let that go, and rediscover who you're meant to be, who you're called to be, who God really sees you as, the sheep that he loves, and he wants to bring into his flock. He wants to care for you, he wants to love you, he wants to protect you, he wants you to know that you're safe in his hands. So are you listening? Are you looking to the Good Shepherd today? Amen.